So it's completely possible to meet protein levels. Of course, you have to eat a healthy, well-planned diet. You can't crowd that plate with, you can find refined vegan foods just like you can find conventional foods. So, eating those high quality plant proteins, things like beans, lentils, tofu, edamame, peanuts, these are all those foods that are rich in protein, making sure you're including those.
Neck pain, backaches, headaches, fatigue, the list goes on, and you're likely on it. Tired of the broken system and big pharma? We offer logical solutions, teach you to think critically, and empower you to reclaim your health. Welcome to the Unplugged Healthcast with Dr. Kevin Wall.
Hey, welcome back to the Unplugged Healthcast. Dr. Wall, your host here today. Today we're going to be exploring the world of plant-powered dieting. Separating myth from truth, we're going to learn practical ways to eat healthier and understand how a plant-based diet or plant-based nutrition can fit in anybody's lifestyle. But before we do that, you got to check this out. Check this video out. Have you seen those miniature cows? Oh my gosh, they're so cute. Everybody wants one. My wife loves them. She's trying to talk me into getting one. I don't know where people are keeping those things. They're hanging out with Sparky, the golden doodle. It's a little strange, I got to think, as the kid's getting attached. No one's picturing Sparky on the menu, but that pet cow may end up being there. I got to tell you an old farm story. I know you're sick of my farm stories, but back in the day, living on the farm back in Iowa, we had a herd of Black Angus cattle. And man, if you ever had a Black Angus steak, those were the best. That's what I grew up on. But as raising cattle, a lot of things happen. And kind of like our last podcast, if you haven't seen, in one of the births, one of the cows gave birth to a baby and kind of detached from the baby. So this little cow, I don't know if the mother knew something was wrong, but she didn't want anything to do with it. So, well, you know what? We ended up having a pet cow, little Bucko. Bucko was quite a character. He didn't really want to be with the cows. He ended up hanging out with all of the cats, the dogs, and we fed him and he grew. But something kind of was wrong with Bucko. Bucko never really grew, I think, taller than like 2 feet. So somehow we invented the miniature cow because this little thing was so cute, got about 2 feet tall, but it got about 3 feet wide because it kept eating. So yeah, that was a fun way to grow up. But one day, Bucko just kind of ended up disappearing. And, when I was young, I don't quite remember how or why. But my sister was younger than I was, and one day she's sitting there as we're eating. She goes, "Hey, what happened to Bucko?" And everyone kind of looked around, looked down at the hamburgers we were eating that day, and no one said a word. So I don't know exactly what happened to Bucko, but it brings up a strange quandary. Man, if we're going to start having cows as pets, are we going to keep eating meat? Really? You're going to have meat on the menu? That guy was out playing with your cats a while ago, according to these videos I'm watching. This kicks for sure in the conversation of, a vegan diet. I have always thought and kind of aspired that I could eat vegetarian, but then, man, I really love the taste of a steak. And how do you have a hamburger without the burger? What the heck am I going to put my ketchup on? These are thoughts we all have, and man, where do I get the protein? I need protein. There's a big drive that we all need lots of protein. So I think kind of a plant-based vegan diet takes a bad rap. I think it just is, there's got to be some reasons for it. There's a lot of really intelligent people that eat plant-based diets only. So I thought, hey, let's figure this thing out. Let's get to the truth. Let's remove all of the fear and the myths and the confusion. And so I have invited on, if you guys would welcome to our show, Sharon Palmer. Hey, Sharon, thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I don't know if you heard my bucko story. It's a little strange, especially as a vegan. But let me just give a little background, if you will. You got a master's in food science. You're a registered dietitian, I believe. You have written books. You speak. You're a co-founder of Food Plus Planet, dedicated to creating a healthier, more sustainable food future. If you want to find Sharon's work or recipes, you can go to SharonPalmer.com. She's also written a couple books. I think the recent one is the Plant-Powered Plan to Beat Diabetes. Man, I am on a rampage to hammer. We've got to get to the root of this. 1 out of 3 people today are dealing with metabolic disorders, and at the top of that list is pre-diabetes, diabetes. So I'm excited to have you on the show, and tell us a little bit about your background and how you became the plant-powered dietitian.
Yeah, thanks so much. I have a really varied degree in nutrition. I worked in hospitals and healthcare throughout my career, but I was really inspired to be a dietitian because as you were talking about your farm experiences, my parents both grew up on farms. I used to spend the summer in my grandparents' farm, and I was always really close to the soil, really interested in how food is grown and how food can really promote health and wellness and prevent diseases. So that really spurred my interest to become a registered dietitian. So I studied nutrition, and then I went back and got my master's in sustainable food systems because I was also interested in how nutrition really connects to the environment and how we can take care of our planet better through the choices we make on our plate. I did become really interested in plant-based nutrition because my parents were trying to be vegetarians. I grew up in basically a blue zone household. If you've heard of the blue zones, where communities in California where I live have been eating a very plant-based diet through many decades, and scientists noticed that these populations lived for a long time. So I actually studied nutrition at Loma Linda University, which is where the blue zone is in the US. I learned all of my nutrition through the lens of plant-based eating, and have really dived into that whole field of research in my career.
Well, that's a cool way to grow up and a very unique way to live even since that. Tell us about your books and maybe why you wrote those.
So I've been working as a journalist for the past 20 years, writing about nutrition, speaking about it, and really having that plant-based focus. So I decided to start really exploring writing about those topics. And there was growing interest in plant-based eating. About 20 years ago, you would start seeing this term plant-based eating. It wasn't vegetarian or vegan, it was plant-based. And this idea that plant-based is more of a spectrum of eating. It doesn't have to be only a vegan diet. It's just this way of eating that encompasses all these plant-based lifestyles. So I really incorporated that into my work. And there was that growing interest among consumers to eat a more plant-based diet.
Yeah, I see it out there. And so that I just learned something. So vegan and plant-based diets, those really aren't exactly the same. They may be similar, but you could be one without the other.
Yeah, there's no precise definition of plant-based, so you'll see people use it in different ways. Most people in the healthcare world think of plant-based as a plant-forward diet, a mostly plant-based, or a flexitarian diet. However, you'll see chefs, the food service industry calling plant-based really, it's like a synonymous with vegan. So you'll see different people using it in different ways. But in the health world, when we talk about a plant-based diet, it could really be a mostly plant-based diet that we see in many traditional diets are very focused on plants.
What about Food Plus Planet? That you founded this organization? Why? What's it about?
Yes, a group of 4 dietitians founded Food and Planet 5 years ago because we recognized this need among healthcare professionals to really use our voices to lift up sustainable eating patterns, because healthcare professionals are trusted voices with consumers. We know this in survey data that we really have influence for people making diet choices, but yet we're not using it when we talk about sustainable choices. So we're really trying to use Food and Planet to provide those resources and that voice to healthcare professionals to advance sustainable diets.
So it's a website, it's a location with a lot of information for people to find resources. Is that what it is?
Yeah, we have a website at foodplanet.org, and we're actually a nonprofit organization. We don't accept funding from food industry. We accept funding from foundations. So we're really working in that space. We're creating programs and resources to help educate healthcare professionals, really solving that question, what is a sustainable diet? Because people don't always have a firm understanding, even in our healthcare world, about what a sustainable diet really is.
Yeah, that term's thrown around a lot these days. I think it's a good tagline. It's a good social media hook. It's what people do to kind of get you to listen. But I'm honestly probably as confused as the other guy on what really you would define that as. You want to try to define that even right now? So before we go any further?
Yeah, I would be happy to. And I think there are lots of people in our world who don't really know what a sustainable diet would be like. So if their clients or their communities ask, how should I be eating? They don't really know how to answer that question. But I like to point people to the Eat Lancet report, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. It was announced in Stockholm. I had the opportunity to go to that. I was involved in that. And it's a multi-center global evidence-based framework on what our diet should be in order to reduce all the environmental impact on our planet, because our food system is threatening major planetary boundaries. In fact, 5 out of 9 of the planetary boundaries that we must stay within are directly threatened by our food system. Those are things like climate change, our water supplies, our land use, biodiversity. So the diet that really would help address that, dramatically address that, is called the Planetary Health Diet, which was just published by Eat Lancet. And it's a very plant-forward diet, very plant-based. It's focused on more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, tubers, nuts and seeds. It's also addressing food waste, which is a huge issue right now. The amount of food, for example, in the US, we're wasting up to 40% of our food supply. So if you think all of the resources that go into creating this food that just goes straight in the trash. So addressing food waste is also a big part of that.
Well, I grew up in a family where, yeah, you finished what was on your plate. You didn't throw things away, leftovers. And so when I see that, it does bug me. I struggle throwing food away, seeing leftovers in the fridge go bad. And you're saying 40% of our food that America's producing is why? Where's it going? Is it just going bad on the shelves, going bad in the corn bins? What's happening to it?
In the US, the vast majority of food that is wasted is at the consumer level. So that means when you're at the supermarket level, there's a lot of food waste because, foods expire before they're purchased. But in our homes, we buy foods, they sit in our refrigerator, we forget they're there and we throw them away. We don't pack leftovers. If we do pack them, we forget to eat them. So that it's really within our control. There's a very small amount of food that's wasted in the farm stage, the industrial stage. It's all happening. The majority of it is happening at the consumer level.
Yeah, that really is bothersome even to me, and I'm not a guy that thinks about that stuff like you do, but that does bug me that we throw that much food away. I see it so often, and it bothers me. All right, well, maybe a little bit more down this thing, because in my hope in this podcast is not to have a debate, because I really am open to hear the truth and a different viewpoint on meat versus vegan. Do you eat meat? Or are you vegetarian by definition?
I'm actually vegan by definition. As I was mentioning, I was raised as a semi-vegetarian, and then I became a vegetarian. And then about 15 years ago, I transitioned to a vegan diet.
All right, well, let's give it to us. Steaks, everybody loves them. Everybody wants one. Hamburgers, everybody's selling them. What's the deal with meat? What are the 3 things that we need to understand about meat that you probably know and I don't quite grasp?
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing is we're just eating too much. I mean, just straight out of the gate, US is eating the most amount of meat compared to any other country on the planet. So we're just vastly eating, more than we need. So even if you didn't want to be a vegan, if you cut back, and we're talking significantly cutting back. I mean, there are some countries that are recommending their populations reduce their meat intake by half. So that is really like the first step. Even if you don't want to be vegan, reducing. And in particular, the area we need to have impact on is red meat consumption, because red meat, those are your herbivores and the ruminants, and they really produce the methane. So they have the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions, and land use and water use is related to red meat consumption. So when you think about, mostly that's beef, that would be also sheep, but we don't eat that much sheep in the US, but so that would be the beef. And in particular, it's processed meat. So when we say processed meat, we talk about bacon, hot dogs, sausages, because those are also linked with negative health benefits. Even red meat intake, for many years, we've been noticing health risks related to high intake of red meat. Processed meat, even more dramatic, to the point where you have the American Institute for Cancer Research saying avoid it altogether, like don't have any processed meat. So really significantly reducing that processed meat, and then also reducing the red meat. That's really the big thing. So when you look at that red meat intake, thinking about the environment, but it's also for human health, because we know that high red meat intake is linked with those heart risk issues. The diabetes, type 2 diabetes is another area, even certain types of cancer. So you would have the health benefits, and you would also have the environmental benefits.
So it seems like, not to say and tell me if I'm wrong, the concern that is a little bit more permeating this is the environmental thing, more than just the intake of meat, but the intake of meat and the concerns for health benefits. You have to be swimming like a salmon upstream on this thing, because, man, the keto diet is through the roof, and everybody's eating more meat and not less. Are you seeing that, what I'm seeing, or am I just hanging in a different crowd?
I agree with you. It's a real issue. There's this overvaluing of protein in our country. That we're very unique in this when you look around the world, where we just put so much priority on protein, and we don't need as much protein as we're getting. We're getting so much protein. And one of the issues with protein is that we're basically pushing out other foods on your plate. So when people think, oh, more protein, when you're doing that, you're pushing out things like whole grains, beans, fruits, and vegetables, things that have so much nutrition and health benefits for us. So there is a big health impact related to this overconsumption of protein, in particular, the red meat, which is higher in saturated fat. It's linked with those higher health problems.
Yeah, I am in agreement with you in so many ways. The more my head goes to, because I'm on this kick to really help people get diabetes, blood sugar, metabolic disorders under control. I agree. It doesn't have to be meat, but it can't be crappy carbs. And so when you talk about grains, we have to be real that today's food is not of our ancestors. Less fibrous, bioengineered for flavor, addictive qualities. We've got fiber removed. So how do people do that? I don't think anyone's really arguing. If they could eat the grains my great-great-grandfather farmed, it would probably be true and be more flavorful. Like, man, I love bread made with good grains, but the stuff that's on the grocery store, no offense, I think they should throw 40% of that away.
Yeah, you're right. One of the big issues with carbohydrates is that they're coming in that refined form. And that's a huge issue, in particular for cardiometabolic issues like type 2 diabetes. So one of my major recommendations is to eat more whole grains. So when you look at those traditional grains, for example, farro, which is a Tuscan whole grain, you eat the simmered kernel of that wheat, and it has a much lower glycemic index. It's very rich in fiber. You get full. You have that sense of satiety. So when we're eating more of these whole grains, quinoa, oats, steel cut oats, sorghum, millet, all these beautiful grains that are part of traditional diets, that's where we get the benefits, and they're better. But you're absolutely right, because so much of our carbohydrates is in this highly refined form, especially when we think about white flours, where there's very little fiber left, rapidly absorbed in the bloodstream, really linking to these issues that come down the road, such as type 2 diabetes.
When you're in pain, it's the little things that make a big difference. A friendly face, a warm welcome, and a plan that finally works. At AFC Physical Medicine and Chiropractic Centers, we take the time to understand what your body really needs, providing personalized care that gives you real relief. Because feeling better isn't just about treatment, it's about feeling like you again. Give us a call or visit our website to start your journey to a pain-free life.
Let's go to the vegetarian vegan. Forget the meat concept. If we're eating there, what is the one myth you want to just get rid of right now? Let's clear up. I'm sure there's about 5 that pop in your head, but let's start with at least the biggest one.
There are lots of myths, but I think the number one we touched on is protein. I hear that consistently from consumers, from people that ask about plant-based diets. How am I going to get my protein? And I think it's important to understand that, as I mentioned, we overestimate how much protein we need. On average, Americans are far exceeding their protein intake, and even studies on vegans show that they're meeting their protein intakes. So it's completely possible to meet protein levels. Of course, you have to eat a healthy, well-planned diet. You can't crowd that plate with, you can find refined vegan foods just like you can find conventional foods. So,
really?
Eating those high quality plant proteins, things like beans, lentils, tofu, edamame, peanuts, these are all those foods that are rich in protein, making sure you're including those. So that's one thing I hear a lot about is protein. And the second thing I hear very consistently is, I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss flavor, and my diet's not going to be as enjoyable. But I work directly with that. And when you really think about what you're getting on the plate, color, textures, flavors, a lot of that is coming from the plant foods. When you think about herbs and spices, those are plant foods. When you think about the textures, whether it's a creamy avocado or a crunchy whole grain, that's the plant foods. So you can really just have the most beautiful, delicious diet while eating plant-based. And then the third point I like to bring up is people always think it's going to be more difficult, more expensive. I'm going to have to learn how to cook a different way. But I always like to remind people that plant-based eating can actually save you money. We've seen that in the research because protein is often the most expensive thing on the plate. So if you're comparing a steak with beans, you're going to win easily with the beans. So it can be cost effective and it can be simple. It doesn't mean you have to learn a whole new style of cooking. You don't have to chop for hours every day. There are easy ways to implement plant-based eating.
Well, you definitely hit thoughts that are going through my head. So I picture our listeners are going there. Price, difficulty, recipes. How do I cook it? I think I just end up having a plate of potatoes, and that, of course, is no better than anything you're talking about. So thank you for clearing some of that up. Well, what about eggs or things like that? I mean, when you talk about vegan, vegetarian, I get so confused on when you can eat this or that. But is that a bad source of protein? Is that something that people can switch to if they want to get off more of the red meats?
Yeah, there is a lot of confusion about what all these definitions are. And a vegan diet is the most, strict plant-based diet. It has no animal flesh and no animal products at all. So it would not include eggs and dairy products. A vegetarian diet includes eggs and dairy products like cheese and milk and yogurt. And then we have like a pescatarian diet that's just like a vegetarian diet with fish only. And then we have like the semi-vegetarian, the flexitarian diet, which we have more and more people interested in that. They don't want to say no to all animal foods, but they want to eat mostly plant-based. But within the vegetarian diet, we have lots of research showing benefits of a vegetarian diet, and eggs are a key source of protein within that diet. So I think that fits in well. The one caveat would be the research is very conflicting about eggs. People are so confused about eggs because we told people not to eat them, and then we told them they could eat them. And I think we're coming back a little bit more with the latest research that if you have a high risk of cardiovascular events, that you want to keep it a little bit under control and not just go completely crazy eating like 5 eggs a day. So being more moderate if you have that cardiovascular risk.
Well, I think you hit it because like our political views in America today, man, we are one side or the other. And I don't think the answer's on either side. I think it's in the middle. I think that people need to figure out how to do that flexitarian thing. That's a new word for me. I'm going to start throwing that around a little bit. Maybe talk to people who really are just, they maybe shut us off already. Well, I ain't going vegan, but they may consider that flexitarian. How do they go from where they're at to flexitarian? What's the first couple things they do to start getting there?
I love that question because I agree with you. I think that's something that we can all try to aim for is eating more plant-based, whatever that looks like to you. And really one of my first tips is to try just one day a week eating a completely plant-based diet. Like there's a program called Meatless Monday, because research shows that we start out our best intentions for health on a Monday. If you think about it over the weekend, maybe you got off track with your health goals, but Monday you're like, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to do all these things. So, and you're usually prepared. You might have shopped over the weekend and done a little planning. So if you just tried one day a week to eat a completely plant-based day, try a new recipe, get your family in on it, that could be a really good entry point. And then when you feel confident, you could maybe add a couple other days during the week. And maybe you want to try Wednesday or Friday, or maybe you just want to do dinners, a couple of dinners a week, or maybe your lunches will be plant-based, but just giving yourself a little goal and just making small steps.
All right. When I go to the department store, I am the worst, like most people. I can't see how clothes fit on me. So I'm going to turn that to you going, okay, I can't picture what a plant-based day looks like. Can you tell us what a plant-based day would look like for you that we may be able to just follow you like the mannequin, show me what I should wear and I'll wear that.
I love that. And I think that's really helpful for people to see examples. I get requests all the time, like, what does a meal plan look like? And for example, my go-to breakfast is steel-cut oats with whatever fruit I have on hand. Right now, we've got apples in season. And then I use soy milk, which is rich in protein, and I add some nuts to it. So I'm getting a whole grain, I'm getting fruits, I'm getting a protein, and it's very satisfying. So I'm fine with that breakfast every day, And then for lunch, I like to do, I work at home. So I like to do a grain bowl, which I might have brown rice or quinoa as a base. And then I add some leafy greens, a can of chickpeas, open it, throw some in. If I've got tomatoes, whatever vegetable I have, add it. It's very filling, takes me like 10 minutes to make. And then dinner is where I might get a little more creative if I have time. Like I might have tacos, and I have a tofu mushroom taco filling that takes 10 minutes to make. And then again, whatever vegetables I have on hand. Or I might make a pasta dish where I just make a tomato sauce and put white beans and zucchini in there. A stir fry, with whatever vegetables I have, some tofu, and serve it with brown rice.
All right, Sharon. Dr. Wall comes over for dinner. You're serving mushroom tofu tacos. Am I knowing the difference? Am I going to go, ooh, this is really good? Or what do you think I'm going to say?
I think you might notice the difference, but I think you would like it because it's savory. It's crumbled tofu. It's savory. It's got some spices in there. It's so very
more
tasty.
Of a texture thing maybe than a taste maybe? Is that what I'm picturing?
Yeah, it's interesting because I love to have friends over and I potlucks and I'm involved in my community. And a lot of times I will bring a vegan, like for example, recently I brought a vegan lasagna and put it down on a buffet table right next to a very meat, cheesy, gooey, ooey lasagna. And mine had all these vegetables, so it was super colorful. And I just want you to guess which one got finished first. And I didn't even say it was vegan. I just put it on the table and people didn't even notice that they just thought it was good. And mine was the first one to be empty.
Wow. Good job. Now I can believe it. I think it is up to the cook to probably figure out how to deliver that. And if you do it right, it's probably as good or better. I've had vegetarian dishes that were just fantastic, and I've had times where I couldn't tell the difference. So yeah, I agree with you in that aspect. Are you struggling losing weight? Do you need a metabolic reset? Are you concerned about diabetes? Hey, it's Dr. Wall here, and it's time to take action. It's time to get unplugged. Here's the simplest solution I've ever seen for losing weight. Reset your metabolism, reduce your A1C levels, and reverse your type 2 diabetes. It's time to feel great again. Hit the link in our show notes or go to drkevinwall.com and learn more about our Feel Great system. This product curbs appetite, reduces your cholesterol levels, increases your HDL levels, and supports normal blood glucose levels. It can increase your GLP levels by 70% when fasting. You don't need Ozempic. It's time to take control of your health again. Hit the link in our show notes and watch the belly fat melt off. I'm kind of going off track from maybe some of the thoughts that we talked about, but fasting, when I talk about helping people with diabetes, I'm going to talk about they got to give their gut a break. They got to reset. They got to stop, let the insulin and glucose burn out of their body. That's what is really the pandemic, I believe, in today because of the refined foods, spiking your glucose levels through the roof. And we've trained people to graze. Like, oh man, you got to eat every 2 hours, which maybe if they're eating what you're eating, that would be fine, but they're not eating what you're eating. So we got glucose, insulin through the roof. What are your thoughts on vegetarian in a fasting format?
I do think there are benefits to intermittent fasting, in particular for diabetes control. There's data on that. And I agree 100%. You know, the way I was raised, again, I said my mom grew up on a farm. We never got to even go in the kitchen between mealtime. It was like, wait for your next meal. And now we're raising populations that the moment they feel like the slightest hunger, they've got to go eat something. Or this idea that you have to have a snack, that's somehow helpful. There's not a lot of research to show that snacking is actually a good habit. You know, I mean, it can definitely help some people who have higher energy needs, who, you know, there are many health conditions where you should split up your meals into smaller portions. But overall, it's not something that every person's going to get benefits from. So I do think there are some documented benefits in it for diabetes control. Having that stretch of time, eating an earlier dinner, having that fasting period at night, not having that snack before you go to bed. You know, there are populations that are eating 2 meals a day and having much better health benefits when you see like a meal like later in the morning, an earlier dinner, and taking that time off. So I do think I agree with you.
I'm going and I'm using myself always in these conversations, so sorry, but I think I'm the average person. When I go out and eat Chinese food or stir fry, which I love, and often it's just only vegetables or vegetables and noodles, man, I feel great. I feel awesome. And it makes me think I should just eat this way all the time. Nothing but plants. That'd be awesome. But then I'm 2 hours later, I'm hungry. So I'm wondering, that's why I was wondering the fast thing, like, is it harder to fast if you're eating a vegan diet? Or I guess I didn't get the right ingredients in.
That's a really good point, because that's one thing I hear from people who are transitioning and they're taking on a plant-based diet. They can feel like they're not satisfied. And in fact, one of the benefits of eating a vegan diet, for example, is that there's weight loss is one of the pleasant side effects. And in general, vegans can weigh an entire BMI category less than non-vegans without dieting, because that diet is so high in fiber. So you're feeling that satiety right off the bat. But it's important to also feel satisfied. So I always recommend making sure you're getting the protein and some healthy fats in there. If you don't have that, you're not going to have that longer level of satiety. You're going to just really get hungry quickly. And some people really are going to have to focus on, some people, I have to tell them, no, you're eating too much fiber. You're getting too full too quickly, especially if they have higher energy needs. So let's kind of dial back on the fiber a little bit, making sure you don't get full so rapidly that you're not getting all the nutrients you need.
So then are you supplementing maybe some of your foods with like essential fatty acids? Because I would think that would be a little harder also. I mean, avocados, of course, and there are some great resources, vegetables with that. But I think those seem to always, in most people's head, because I'm going there, that seems to fall in the fish category and the oil category, and maybe a vegetarian diet would be missing that. Do you supplement? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I recommend healthful fats to make sure they're getting those in the diet. And to address the things like omega-3s, that's an important issue.
Yeah.
Omega-3s are typically found in seafood. You can get plant-based omega-3s in things like soy, walnuts, chia, hemp seeds, flax seeds, and that can be converted in the body. However, it is in smaller levels. So I recommend people who are eating a plant-based diet make sure they're getting a lot of these plant-based omega-3s in their diet in a consistent way. You can also supplement with algae, which is basically where fish get their omega-3s to begin with. And then just the natural sources of fat, avocados, nuts, seeds, tahini, peanut butter, olive oil. I recommend moderate amounts of olive oil or avocado oil as well.
All right, Sharon. Well, already I know you've provided just a ton of great information. I've learned a bunch. I'm not saying we're done, but we probably should be wrapping this up a little bit. Let's see if we can take it home with the top 5 foods, vegetarian, vegan focused foods, plant-based foods that everybody needs to always have, whether they believe us or not. Whether they ever go vegan or flexitarian, they still need to understand that, that God created these vegetables and fruits, and I doubt that there was an omission that we shouldn't eat them. I think everyone needs to have them. What are the top 5 everyone's got to have?
Well, I would start out with beans. I mentioned that before. I mean, these beans such as lentils, chickpeas, black beans, lima beans, there's a variety of beans, and they've been part of the cornerstone of diets around the world since the eons. They're a really important part of human diets. And they're so packed with nutrition. They're so high in fiber, they're protein, they're linked with so many health benefits, and Americans just don't eat enough of them. The recommendation is to have 1.5 cups per week. So like if you think of 3 times a week, just a small amount, but we are far from that. So if we could get more beans on our plate, and that basically pushes out some of the other animal proteins, or at least limits it a little bit, because it could take the place. Yeah. And then whole grains, I mentioned the whole grains, prioritizing those over those refined grains, because whole grains, things like quinoa and millet and sorghum, they're rich in nutrients and fiber. And vegetables, I mean, 9% of Americans meet their vegetable requirement. So all of us, no matter what your diet, we are so paltry on our vegetable consumption. And
what do you think the normal amount is?
Well, right now we're recommended to get about 5 half-cup servings, of a day, and we're just so far from that.
5 half-cup servings a day.
Yeah,
oh
2.5 cups. Yeah.
Yes, we're not even close.
2.5 cups. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and if you think that a lot of Americans, we're not getting them at breakfast, which is kind of common. Maybe at lunch you do a drive-through, and that lettuce leaf on your sandwich does not count. So maybe you're coming into dinner with no vegetables, and maybe you get 1 serving. And that's why you see such a little amount. We've got to figure out how to get vegetables in at lunch and find creative ways, to get more in at dinner. And then I would say fruits, we're not getting enough fruits. I recommend getting 3 fruits a day, just small servings of fruit, and then nuts and seeds as well.
All right. Any specific fruit that comes to your mind when you put it on your plate? Or do you diversify?
I think diversification is so important. There's a lot now in nutrition science about how we need to have a broader range of plant foods that we're eating, and not just always eat the same few, because we get more nutrients, we get more phytochemicals. I do strongly recommend berries, trying to fit berries in your diet as much as possible, because there's a lot of great research on how powerful berries have been throughout human health. So when you think about blackberries and blueberries and raspberries, strawberries, trying to find ways to get those in the diet more often. And back to the vegetables, green leafy vegetables are particularly potent in nutrition. And I recommend trying to fit that in every day, a small serving of green leafy vegetables.
Well, you definitely ran the gamut there. I got to throw my 2 cents in because I see, and I grew up in where my mom, and I see a lot of people, they always peel their vegetables, they peel their fruit. And I don't think people realize that that's where most of the nutrition is, and most of the fiber is on the outside. And so I would just make sure, if you are getting fruits and vegetables, which we need to do better, make sure you're eating them with the coverings on as much as possible. And what are your thoughts on when people cook them, Sharon, so much that they become soft? Aren't they breaking down the fibers and eliminating a lot of the nutrients through the boiling, cooking process?
That's an excellent point, and you're right on base there. I always recommend to avoid peeling as much as possible. And many of our fruits and vegetables do not require them. Technically, you can eat an orange peel. I prefer not to, although I love the zest of the orange. But, all of our apples and pears and peaches and all of those, you can eat the skin. And then when it comes to vegetables like carrots, I never peel my carrots. I just scrub them. Because you're right, so much of the nutrition is concentrated on the outer layer of the plant food. So when you think nature created a defense system, and basically it's all concentrated on the outside of the plant because that helped protect it from the sun, it helped it protect it from insects, and we gain benefits by eating that concentrated layer where there's more fiber, more phytochemicals. And also with the boiling, overcooking definitely does detract from your nutrition value. You will throw away vegetables, vitamins, you'll destroy vitamins. So minimal cooking, minimal water, just really light cooking preparations will preserve some of that.
All right, Sharon. Well, we've given a lot to think about and definitely a lot of things to do to be healthier. And that's the reason this podcast exists, unplugging people from the systems and the repetitive cycles and habits that have got us in this mess. Because I don't think you're arguing, because I see it every day. We're pretty sick, diabetes, but on top of that, we got a lot of other problems. So here's an answer. Sharon's a resource. Sharon, if they want to find you again, why don't you just remind us, where do we find recipes just so we can cook like you and then eat like you? And then if people want to find you, where would they get more information?
You can find me at sharonpalmer.com, which is my website, which is also, you can also get there through the Plant-Powered Dietitian. But at my website, I have a lot of free recipes and resources and nutrition articles. So I have a pretty lively community there. And I'm also on social media at Sharon Palmer RD, which stands for Registered Dietitian. So Sharon Palmer RD. You can find out more about my books on plant-based eating at my website too.
Are they on Amazon if someone wants to find them there?
Absolutely.
All right.
If you look for Sharon Palmer, you'll find them.
Okay, guys. Well, there you go. If you want to learn more about what she's doing, about vegetarian, eating vegan, or just being a flexitarian, which is now my favorite word, you can go and find that on SharonPalmer.com. But this is our wrap up here. We're going to close this thing out. Thanks again, Sharon, for joining us today. Thanks for all of you for showing. If you would do me a favor, we ask very little. These podcasts exist just to help people. So if you would share these, if you would like it, if you would subscribe, you'd really help the algorithm. More people would find this information. It's good information. These people are sharing their knowledge, their life, their passion, and we're just trying to get you guys to hear it so you can get healthier. So that's a good thing. All right. Well, this is Sharon Palmer and Dr. Kevin Wall, and we're checking out today. Always remember, be healthy, be blessed, never give up, never give in, and consider eating more vegetables. We'll see you again on the next episode of the Unplugged Healthcast.
The information provided in this podcast is for general knowledge and informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for diagnosis and treatment of any medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Unplugged Healthcast or Dr. Wall.